Good evening. Welcome to Reflections on East Granby. Today's date is March 27, 2010. It's a Saturday evening, and our guest tonight is Paul Noble, a 6-year resident of East Granby, originally from Manhattan.
Yes.
Longtime resident of Manhattan, moved to East Granby 6 years ago, and it's a pleasure to have you on here tonight.
Thank you, Mike.
Let's get started, Paul.
It's mutual, or mucilage, as my mother used to say.
Okay, yeah. All right, so why don't you take us back? You were born in New York City in 1938?
Correct, and I can go back even further than my birth.
Okay, why don't we start with...
My mom told me I was conceived
Okay.
on Bedford Street in Greenwich Village.
Okay.
And I was born on what is now Roosevelt Island, which you may have heard of, which is officially a part of Manhattan. It's a big island in the middle of the East River.
All right.
And there was a tremendous housing project built there. I shouldn't say project because it's upscale or mid-scale.
Right.
And there's a very well-known tramway now that runs across the river from 59th Street in Manhattan to Roosevelt Island.
Is Roosevelt Island part of Manhattan?
It is officially, but
Okay.
it's an island and it's separated by the water.
Right.
And when I was born there, it was called Welfare Island, a different connotation than what we use now for welfare. In those days, they used welfare to mean city services for people.
Okay.
Period. So the municipal hospitals were under welfare.
Right.
And that was where the New York City Municipal Hospital was built. And that's where I was born. Before that, it's very interesting historically, as Blackwell's Island. General Blackwell lived there. His mansion is still there from the Revolutionary times.
Really?
Yeah.
So it evolved into a hospital island, and then they built housing there?
And they built housing, yeah.
Interesting. So what are your early memories of being...
Well, I don't remember my time on Welfare Island.
No, I can't.
But what happened then is my parents moved to the Upper West Side.
Okay.
It was interesting because their neighbor was Vincente Minnelli, the well-known movie director who was married to Judy Garland.
Okay.
It's Liza's father.
Really?
Yeah. That I don't remember. Then they moved to East 92nd Street and 3rd Avenue, which I do remember. It was right across the street from the Rupert Brewery. Rupert was one of the big beers in New York.
Right.
And
there were a lot of microbreweries back then.
Well, they weren't micro. They were monster breweries.
Okay, all right. But there was a lot more in terms
There
of
are a
local
lot
brews.
more.
Yeah, yeah.
There was Rupert, Rheingold, Ballantine. I think the only one left is Pabst.
It's coming back now, but for a long time it was.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And as my mother pointed out, my little room overlooked the window of the office where Babe Ruth signed his contract.
No kidding.
Because Rupert Brewery owned the Yankees then.
That's right. Wow. So you were right in the thick of it down there.
We were right in the thick of it. But the horror of 3rd Avenue at the time was there was an elevated train line.
A tram?
It was just like if you've been in New York City where in the boroughs the subways come above ground.
Right.
Or you see in Chicago. It was just like that.
Right.
And we were right at the level
They go
of the
screaming
train.
by you.
Yeah, so that was very loud.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I guess I'm averse to noise. It's still to this day.
So you really appreciate East Granby.
That's one of the reasons I moved up here.
Okay, so that must have been an incredibly interesting childhood. Of course, it's all relative. You were young. You didn't know anything else. So, but
the only other memory I have of 92nd was that it was during the war. I was like 4.
Right.
And we had a blackout. I remember one blackout.
Okay.
With the sirens and the whole thing.
Yep.
And I was scared. And we didn't have money. You know, my parents lived through the Depression. This is not long after.
Right.
And I had a tiny room, so they kept me in a crib because they couldn't afford a bed, I guess, and also because there was no room in the room for a real bed. And I remember standing there sort of crying, and then my sister and my mother came into the room giggling. And I told them I was thirsty, and they came in giggling. And my sister had a glass of a dark liquid, and she gave it to me. And I had a drink. It was Pepsi, my first Pepsi.
Wow.
And it was so delicious, I never forgot it.
It's an early memory.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had a brother and sister, you said?
Yeah, my brother Pete He's 10 years older than I am to the month.
Okay.
He wanted to be in World War II because we had an uncle who was a West Pointer who was in the war, and he was really like my brother's big brother,
Right.
Bob Plett, and he was highly decorated and whatnot. So the earliest my brother could get in by lying about his age, etc., was at 46, and he wound up being in the I.B. Farben building in Berlin for the trials, for the war trials.
Wow. Yeah.
Which was fascinating. He used to tell me a lot.
The Nuremberg.
The Nuremberg. Yeah, the
Nuremberg
trials.
Yeah,
exactly.
Wow, fascinating piece of history there.
Yeah.
Now you had a sister also.
My sister, yes, my sister was my Bohemian sister.
Mm-hmm.
She married young. She married a painter, an abstract expressionist artist.
Mm-hmm.
And my father, by the way, was a photographer.
Okay.
And my mother was a voice-trained singer.
Wow.
But she was one of those realistic people who everyone in the arts should have a backup job.
Right.
And she had become a legal stenographer when she was a kid, and that's what she did for the rest of her life. She was working until she was 74.
Wow.
And so my sister got divorced and had a few strange bohemian years, but she actually became a painter herself. She got her MFA at a late age in her 40s. We were proud of her.
Yeah.
And
so she. So you're just getting the neighborhood. Were you in that apartment through your time as a child, or?
well, in Manhattan, just in my time in Manhattan, since from the time I was born until 90, I think I mentioned here, I counted just recently because people, when I would say I lived there, they say, you live there too?
Right.
I counted the number of places I lived, and just in Manhattan, because my mother we used to move a lot after my mother left my father.
Okay.
My mother was not, she didn't plan financially very well.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was like 22 places.
Wow.
That we lived.
That wasn't that uncommon in those days. If you didn't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
You tended to buy.
Yeah.
Okay. So you went to school in New York.
Yes.
Elementary school.
Yes. It was kind of a little strange. When I was they had skipping then. They don't have that anymore, do they?
Skipping?
Skipping grades.
Skipping when you went grade.
I don't mean a game.
Yeah. No,
skipping.
I thought you meant skipping school.
Oh no.
No, well, you would go and if you tested ahead of your curve,
Right.
you'd get up. Yeah, they still do it occasionally.
They do.
Yeah.
Well, I've been against it ever since because my experience was very bad. In elementary school, I skipped twice.
Okay.
I was a little kid.
Right.
I was puny, and I was shy.
Right.
And I tell people that now, and they laugh.
Right.
And then we had junior high school, like middle school here.
Right.
And then I went into middle school, and my first few weeks of middle school, they decided that I should be in the special class, which meant I did 3 years and 2. So by this time, I'm 2 years younger than everyone else.
Yeah.
They're all much bigger.
That doesn't
And
always
I
work
was sort
so
of
well.
lost. No, it doesn't. Plus, the other major shortcoming of that was that I could never do my homework at home because it was too chaotic.
Okay.
So then I graduated from high school when I was 15, and I didn't have the money to go to college. And things were dysfunctional, let's say. And when I was 17, my sister was good enough, she was married with 2 kids, to invite me to live with them.
Okay.
So I did, but because I felt like a burden, I wound up pushing up my draft for the Army, and I went in the Army when I was 19, just barely 19.
So it was your ticket to some sort of structured life at that point.
Yeah, I knew I had to get it over and done with. I had been.
Well, you still had the draft, so you were going to have to do it.
I would have had to do it eventually. Plus, I knew I had been in the Civil Air Patrol.
Right.
And my particular squadron, the commander was a politician, a very politically aware warehouse owner.
Okay.
Who liked to make lobby with the armed services to get business. So we had a drill team,
Right.
and we were like the best. And there were regional competitions, state competition, regional competition. There was a national competition, and we won all of them.
Great.
And I was actually on the Ed Sullivan show. So
No kidding. Wow.
I'm probably the only guy who was on the Ed Sullivan.
Yeah, so far it hasn't come up yet.
Yeah.
Great. Sounds like an interesting life, really, for a young guy before you headed off into the military. It sounds like.
Yeah.
So you're
a little different.
Yeah. So other than the fact that you were a couple grades ahead, the schools and your school years were okay for you?
Well, New York City school system at that time was kind of, they didn't have money. My high school, I couldn't. Well, I thought I couldn't because my self-esteem was not so great at that point. I couldn't go to the school I wanted to go to. So I wound up going to a school that had very little money. They closed the swimming pool because it was a mess.
No, did they
kept it closed.
Oh, okay. So there were not a lot of funds for schools in that area. But did they have the same system in New York? Correct me if I'm wrong. Where you didn't necessarily go to the school in your neighborhood.
Oh, right. High school, you could go anywhere in the city.
You would choose your school. It was more of almost like a European system where you kind of get tracked into a certain school.
Yeah, elementary and middle school, you went more or less in your neighborhood.
Okay.
But otherwise, high school.
And they had specific schools that were kind of structured for certain disciplines?
There were 3 top schools, Stuyvesant High School, which was academically superior in just about everything.
Right.
Brooklyn Tech,
right,
which was for kids who wanted to be engineers eventually. Engineering was a big deal then.
Right, right. Oh, yeah.
And the Bronx High School of Science, where they still have science fairs, and they usually walk away with all the national prizes.
Right, right.
Very good.
So it was more like the charter school system that we've kind of developed.
It was sort of an early version of that, yeah.
Interesting, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you sign up and you go off into the military. What branch did you?
I was in the Army. I was in the Combat Engineers.
Okay.
I was in the 3rd Infantry Division, which was a very storied division in World War II, most decorated ever.
What year was that?
That was in 57 to 59. The way they kept changing systems at the time in the Army, and they were experimenting.
Right.
And this was called the pentomic system, because of nuclear power and whatnot.
Okay.
They changed it from the old triangle system, where there was a division with 3 regiments, and each regiment had 3 companies, to a system where a division had 5 battle groups.
Okay.
Each battle group was basically half an infantry regiment, but with all the supporting elements, tanks.
So they were
engineers.
standalone.
Exactly.
So
the idea was to be more mobile and independent.
Right.
Yeah.
So you could you had more mobility in terms of different theaters if you had to.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
And I was a demolition specialist. So.
Oh, okay. Seems like I've had a few. My uncle was. It seems like that was a fairly common. I guess that's big part of war.
And it's nothing, by the way, not to give anyone the wrong impression.
Yeah.
It's nothing like these brave people in the Hurt Lock or anything.
Climbing under bridges and stuff. No.
That's explosive ordnance demolition.
Yeah.
The engineers, we built bridges.
Right.
We laid minefields, put up barbed wire. We did river crossings.
Right.
We blew up bridges.
Okay.
But the techniques, aside from it being potentially dangerous, were quite easy, really.
Okay. All right. So that was. Did you actually? You weren't in any theater of war at that point.
I escaped combat.
Those years there was no active conflict. Yeah. So where did you train?
We stayed. The other unusual thing was I stayed with the same company from the beginning of basic training all the way through. That's very unusual. They were playing with that too. Mm-hmm. So we trained in Fort Benning, Georgia, basic and advanced, and then we went to Germany, which is what the only thing I wanted when I went in the Army was to go to Germany.
Okay, that was
I had German in junior high school. It was a German neighborhood.
Okay,
and because of my brother and my uncle, I guess.
Right.
I wanted to go to Germany.
So now you had, because they had served there. Had they?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So you, that was a big, there was large deployments still in Germany at that point.
Oh, yeah. We had a lot of troops there.
We were still staring at the bear.
Oh, yeah.
So you had, So you came back. You said you served again, but well, you came back to New York from when you
I came back to New York.
You were discharged.
Actually, it's separated. It's called.
Okay.
Discharge is Army language.
Yeah.
I separated, which meant that I could either join the National Guard and be discharged in 2 years.
Okay.
I had no intention of joining the National
Right.
Guard. I was through with the Army. I
Right.
was glad to get out. Or 3 years of what they called, what did they call it? Control group.
Okay.
Which meant you went to no meetings, but you could be called back. But that had never happened in the history of the country,
Right.
except during a war. So then they had the Berlin crisis, and where there was no war.
61.
61.
Yeah.
And they called me back. They called a bunch of guys back, and
Right.
they ruined a lot of lives. I was still single, and we had guys who had a construction business and 3 kids.
Yeah.
They never would have been eligible to be drafted, but they pulled them back.
That's I can imagine you're just starting to get your life rolling, and all of a sudden you're back in.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's why I'm very much against this whole thing with using National Guard troops like on repeat.
And repeat this. Yeah, I
It's-
agree. Keep
they-
calling them up. You've basically disrupted their whole life.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you ended up back in Germany.
No, we spent 9 months in beautiful downtown Fort Devens, Massachusetts.
Okay.
It was just a complete waste of time.
Was it? It was just in case.
It was ridiculous.
Backup.
It was political.
Okay.
The call-up was political, pure and simple. For Kennedy to show Khrushchev he wasn't weak, as Khrushchev accused him of being.
It was a flexing of the muscle.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. So you came back. You were you got released from that tour, and you came back to Manhattan.
Came back to New York.
Okay.
I still was aimless, and
How old were you at this point?
at 21.
Okay.
No, at 21 when I got out the first time.
First time, yeah.
So at 23, I was just 24.
Okay.
And I hadn't been to college yet because, well, all those other things had happened. So they had no GI Bill
Right.
when I was a kid.
Right.
They had eliminated it.
Yep.
So they reinstituted it. So then I went to school at night while working, which, as we all know, is not the easiest thing in the world.
No.
Plus,
What did you go to school for?
liberal arts.
Okay.
And I didn't finish because I had other priorities like chasing girls and having fun.
New York was a fun place in that day, huh?
Ah, God.
Sure, still is.
Still is if you have the money. Yeah.
But be a young guy in New York, it was a lot to distract you.
Yes.
So, tell us a little bit about New York in that era. What was it like?
Well, it was a pivotal period.
All right.
The early '60s, you know, they had the Bohemian art movement began to become almost mainstream in the arts. The academic changes in philosophy of modern life, especially in California.
Right.
The student activists
Right.
were just rising up. Jazz had become very popular. I was a big jazz lover. I used to go to jazz places all the time. And then, of course, drugs
Right.
started to become popular, and that caused a lot of problems.
Right.
And there was a lot of crime. Not as much as in the '70s, probably, but
Yeah, it was.
and it was still a rough place. You know, I mean, I mean, I don't know about you, but the last time I saw a bar fight was must be 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was a kid, you see them all the time.
It depends on what bar you're in, but
That's correct. It does depend.
But yeah, back in the old neighborhoods in New
Yeah.
York, it was fairly common.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Pretty rowdy place.
Rowdy.
So where did you live in those years? What parts of New York?
Well, as I said, we moved to different places. I even moved. My mother and I even spent about 6 months in the Bronx because she met a woman who had a house. And I lived with my sister at first in Bayside, Queens, which I didn't like. People who are from Manhattan and born in Manhattan basically don't like to live in the other boroughs, except now Brooklyn, which is very hip now.
Right. It's like moving into the suburbs from the big city. It's not.
Yeah, it's almost like Greenwich Village used to be.
Okay. Yeah. So when you were a young guy and you were rambling around New York, and then what parts of Manhattan?
When I was on my own,
yeah.
I lived in the Hotel Chelsea for a while, which is that famous place where Brendan Behan and Kurt Cobain
met his end there.
Met his end there. You know. That was just for a couple of months with a girlfriend, and then I lived on the Lower East Side, East Village, and I lived in the Village.
So you didn't get married.
No.
But what were you doing for a living in this period?
Well, I was doing a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
Mostly I was not a hardcore bohemian, you know. I was sort of on the fringe.
A weekend bohemian?
Well, you could say that. But I had a lot of friends downtown. I had a lot of friends uptown. But my work was usually uptown, midtown.
Right.
For corporations. But low-level jobs. I didn't know what I wanted to do, except I wanted to be a writer or a journalist.
Right.
I had all these dreams, but the problem was when I was a kid, you know, I was always told that I was going to be something fantastic, and blah, blah. But my parents never explained to me that you had to do a lot of hard work.
You know, I've said that to a lot of young people. I've said that the flip side of the American dream, which is you can be anything you want, is you also have to decide on what you want to be at some point, or you really, you know, you can still have a great life, but you might not achieve some of the things you wanted to. So.
Exactly, and I didn't have any direction. I had not made any choice. So
right.
when I finally pulled myself up by the bootstraps, I just found myself in a business, the travel business, that I entered by chance. Oh, when I got out of the Army the second time, and I was trying to figure out what kind of job to get, because I didn't really have any strong experience in one field. There was an ad for the AAA in New York, the Auto Club of New York.
Okay.
And it included overtime, and it was travel. So I thought,
good combination.
I like travel.
You like overtime.
I like overtime. So I did that. I was with them for 5 years. I became the travel counsel, travel agent, whatnot. And the overtime is funny because the overtime was in emergency road service, which was, you know, how people get stuck here and went through the course. But in New York City, you can imagine when they have a bad snowstorm, we had like 200 people on the phones.
I bet, yeah. I see. So they would call in massive amounts of phone operators just to field the...
And we would send a paper ticket down a rubber belt to guys who would call the gas stations.
Really?
Yes.
So it was like a factory.
It was like a factory.
That's great. Wow. So you had, so you did that for a while. Sounds like you had a heck of a fun time, just kind of doing your different jobs. And
some of them, some of them real fun. I also sold clothes. I was a clothing salesman.
Okay.
I drove a cab while I was going to school. That was fun.
Yeah, I bet. By the way, some of the brightest people I've ever met have driven cab drivers.
All kinds of people.
It's the most fascinating.
Yeah,
you really never know what they're going to...
I'm so glad I did it, you know.
Yeah.
Met a lot of people.
Right. So just run us through a few of your other jobs.
Well, I said the
you mentioned
clothing
you worked
business.
Something with the Helmsley. You did something with the...
Oh, well, the auto club led to a job as a trainer at a Holiday Inn reservations office in New York.
Okay.
Which had a lot of people.
Right.
And that led to a job working for Lowe's Hotels in their representation division, which had a call center for their own hotels and for other hotels.
Right.
So they went into, because they learned about the hotel representation business, there were businesses in New York that just did that.
Okay.
They didn't own anything.
Right.
They would just sign you up if you were a hotel owner, and they do your reservations for you.
Marketing. And
the 800 number, marketing to travel agencies and blah, blah, blah. And that's when I first started to get interested in what I was doing at a job, you know, aside from being Mr. Cool.
Right, right.
And, or thinking I was. And I found I was very good at it.
Right.
Just from, knowing all this stuff from experience. So I became, I guess, like a hot shot, and, I got a reputation. And we had clients. One of the clients was Rock Resorts, the Rockefeller Company.
Okay.
That owns Caneel Bay did own Caneel Bay, Little Dix Bay in the Caribbean, and Cerro Dorado in Puerto Rico, and the Woodstock Inn in Vermont. And it's a very prestigious company, obviously, just from the name.
Yeah.
And
they collected prime spots. They weren't like
yes.
Yeah.
And Lawrence Rockefeller, the two in the Virgin Islands were labors of love for him. I think they all were. He was a very sincere man, and he. The Rockefellers, I don't know if you know, were known for being the multimillionaires who never made a splash.
Right.
They didn't, not the opposite of Donald Trump. No brass railings, that kind of.
Right.
So Caneel Bay started because he wanted a place that you could have luxury, where wealthy people could go. It was expensive, and have great food and everything. No glitz, no telephones, no television sets. And that's what it was. Became very successful. But of course,
like a retreat,
it was a retreat,
a monk's retreat.
You're right.
To turn it off, right?
Later, everyone wants television. You can always turn it off.
Seriously, there's still that element. I remember being in a place in California that was very like that, way up in the Sierra Nevadas. It cost like $2,000 a night to stay there, but it was just a hole in the mountain.
Right. A little people wanted to throw it in.
Very nice, but people just wanted to get away, and there were these little kind of holes, and there were little apartments. Anyway, so you have. You did that. You got in the travel industry, and you spent quite a bit of time doing that, right? You mentioned something. You've traveled to. You used to manage did something in Ireland.
Well, I'll just add one thing on where I was going, which was that they had two directors of sales working for Rock Resorts.
Okay. For
the group, they didn't have so many hotels that they had to have one on each property.
Right.
And they are in the corporate offices in 30 Rock, where Rockefeller has his offices.
Right.
Which is next, no, I'm sorry, not 30 Rock, 10 Rock, which is next door.
Okay.
The Associated Press building. And we met this guy who did corporate sales. Mm-hmm. The other guy did travel agency sales. And we hit it off, and he had been talking to some people about going into this business, the hotel representation business, because when he saw my company, Lowe's, go in and take over this business for Rock Resorts, he thought, who are they, more or less?
Right, saw an opportunity.
Yeah. And so he got some partners, and he started this business, and he was going around looking for people, and he needed a general manager. So he came to me, and we chatted, and it's nice to be sought after, recruited. And I became general manager, and I did the whole thing. He didn't know anything about the business.
So you took it over.
He was a great front man.
Yeah.
So he would get clients, very smooth. And I made the operation. I computerized the company.
How many years did you do that?
12 years.
Okay, and then that situation split?
Well, I became vice president, and then I became a minor partner, then I became a full partner.
Right.
And then we sold the company, and by that time we were getting on each other's nerves, and a bunch of unfortunate things happened, let's put it that way. And I wound up with not so much money. But meanwhile, we had moved to Connecticut.
Okay.
Because we signed the lease in '80
right.
in New York for $26 a square foot.
Right.
And which is not peanuts. And then in '90, they wanted to go to $65 a square foot.
Wow.
So he lived in New Canaan, and he asked me if I'd ever thought about moving to Connecticut. By that time, Mike, I was 10 years, for 10 years I had wanted to leave New York. It was when crime was high, and it was very harsh.
Those were bad years.
They were.
Yeah. It wasn't a fun place to live.
It was not. Yeah. And I made good money, but not quite enough
Right.
to, you know.
So you get to Connecticut. Now, how'd you end up? You lived here for a few. Your business disbanded, and how'd you
We
end
sold
up?
the business in 91, 92. I was living in the town where the business was in Monroe, and I was renting a condo, and the bank grabbed the condo from the owners, and I moved to Norwalk.
Okay.
And I was there for a while, and I was looking for work. And, you know, I was old enough where it became difficult.
Gets tougher, yeah.
Plus the job I had, the whole business changed. So I was not really as qualified for stuff as I had been previously, and certainly no longer a hotshot. So I did what everyone does when they can't get a job. I became a management consultant.
Right.
And that was interesting for a while. But after a while, I wasn't learning the new stuff.
Right.
So then I had problems, and we won't go into that, but I wound up, I lived in Hartford for a while, and a woman I knew, once I saw my way clear to, I had gotten a couple of jobs. I'd gotten a temp job for a GE company
You mentioned
that went from supposed to be for 4 weeks, wound up 18 months, and they had made me team leader of a website project, and I thought I'd be able to continue getting jobs. And she mentioned she'd grown up in East Granby.
Okay.
And she lives in Granby now, and her parents.
You want to share her name?
You know what? It's embarrassing.
Not without asking.
No, it's not that. It's I can't remember her last name.
That's okay.
Her first name is Laura. She was
Okay, so Laura.
she's a great woman. She, I tell you one fact that
Don't
you
worry,
may know
I know
about.
you feel.
She was, I think, discus champion of the state.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Her
unique.
parents own a farm on Holcomb Street, Holcomb Road
In
in East Granby.
East Granby. Okay, right.
Yeah. And I forget their last name too.
So she recommended East Granby. Now we'll segue into your time in East Granby. When you first came to East Granby, what was your impression?
Well, I had driven first before I moved. I had gotten in my car. I had a BMW at the time.
Okay.
It had been my company car, believe it or
Right.
not. So I had that. That was my one thing I saved as four-wheel drive, thank God.
Wow.
And I had started exploring, and I just loved the Farmington Valley, parts of the Farmington Valley area. I'd go through on a spring day, and this is beautiful, you know. And when I came up here, I thought, this is very nice, nice little town, you know.
Yeah.
And I went to where I live, and it looked fine.
Where do you live?
I live at Turkey Hills.
Okay.
And I thought, this is not fabulous, but the space was good
Right,
in the apartment, in the units. And the trees are, we're in the woods.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I thought, this is fine, you know. And I had been in Granby.
Mm-hmm. You lived in Granby?
I'm sorry?
You lived
No,
in?
no.
Oh.
I had been in Granby when I came up.
Okay.
As well as going to East Granby Town Center, which is, as you know, not large. And so I thought, well, these two towns, there's a synergy here. And I had not been in Simsbury at all at that time, and then later I wound up going to Simsbury. So I just
So you
liked
thought
the
it was
area.
a manageable little town, and you liked the area enough to investigate.
Yeah, and I like a few things about the towns. I think East Granby has a really terrific social services for people who don't have a lot of bucks. And nice people doing it.
It's accessible.
It's very accessible.
Okay.
Yeah.
They do a lot to kind of make it easy to live here, even if you're not
Right.
driving your BMW around.
That's right. Well, that's gone. I had it for 15 years.
Yeah.
But I'm happier with my Subaru. I mean, that Subaru is not
A pitch?
to patronize you.
No.
But I tell you, I enjoy my driving my Legacy as much as I enjoy driving my 325.
Okay.
The way it handles and everything. Nice car.
Now you had you've been in East Granby for 6 years.
Yes.
What anything else that you've noticed about the town since you've been here that kind of jumps out if you were going to describe the town to somebody like from the old neighborhood?
The bike trails, which I don't go on.
Right.
But I think that's a great thing for people who do.
Right.
And now, when I first moved here, there were hardly any restaurants. I mean, I guess there was one restaurant.
Right.
And now you have a good Chinese restaurant. There's a nice little Italian place. Can I mention the name?
Sure.
Gio's. And
yeah.
then there's the other one, J&G. And it's easy, you know. It's
easy to
laid
get
back.
So is there anything about the town that, any characters you've met since you've been here that you wanted to share?
I haven't met enough characters.
Okay.
And I'm going to try and change that.
Okay.
I met one character I can think of. Well, the maintenance man who used to be at Turkey Hills was a character.
Was he?
And he was a Baptist minister.
Really?
And booming voice. He was larger than life, you know.
Okay.
And I've never seen anyone able to do the physical work that he could. I mean, he just lifts stuff up. He had barbells in the basement of one of the buildings. He invited me to use it, you know.
His own private gym?
He had his own private gym. And he just like, I can imagine him picking up a camera and squeezing it till it was, melted, you know.
Okay.
It was just, and one day I was leaving the property and there were a lot of sumac trees at the end of the property, which I have an aversion to because one of the apartments we lived in when I was a kid in New York, we had them in the back.
Right.
And I looked down and there was a guy who was kind of mean looking. He was tall, slim, youngish, and a little girl. And he was ordering her around. I thought, what is this, you know?
Yeah.
So I had my alarm out. And he came up and he was talking to her sort of mean. So anyway, I told the maintenance guy. So he said, oh, no, Paul. He laughed. He said, I know what you're talking about. He said, but they love each other. That's her father. And, he's a funny guy. And he'll do anything for you if he likes you. And don't worry about the girl, believe me. I said, I took his word for it. At one point, I'm not handy around. I never did any contracting or building.
Right.
So they gave me one of those Venetian blinds, the vertical Venetian blinds for my sliders.
Right.
And I said, I have to put this up, And so I asked the maintenance guy, and he said, what's his name? I'll ask him for you. Guy comes down, and couldn't have been nicer. Put them up. He explained everything to me, which I appreciated because I'm interested.
Right.
Showed me his new level and put it up. And I said, that's really terrific. I said, how much do I owe you? He says, nothing. I said, come on, let me give me $50. I said,
right.
No, absolutely not.
Huh.
And he looked at me and said, I'll tell you something. He said, when I was younger, I was not a good person. He said, I used to hurt people.
Really? That's strange.
Yeah, he was strange. He looked like he was going to hurt you.
Yeah. Wow.
Like I said, for the first time.
Yeah.
And he said, and I'm not like that anymore. Now, so I have a lot to make up for.
Yeah.
He says, and you're a nice guy, and I'm glad I could do it for you.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah. That was an interesting character.
You asked for one.
Yeah,
You got it.
Okay, so you've been. Is there anything you're a pretty worldly guy. You've been around. Is there anything you think East Granby? Any suggestions you would have? Any improvements or anything they could do differently, or anything you'd like to see in town, or anything?
Well, I think that I don't know how this could be done, except over the years, but I think it would be better for the town if we had more in the town center. Mm-hmm. For example, when it comes to shopping, and no matter what you're shopping for, everything is location, 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 And right now, very frankly, I'm right in between the two town centers.
Right.
So if I'm going to the grocery store,
You go-
I have to go to Granby.
Right. Right.
To either one of the two big shopping centers. Windsor is too far for me, and I don't like it anyway.
Right.
And I think, we've made a few strides in that direction with the new restaurants. I think it would be good if, some kind of business that attracted customers socially,
Right.
like restaurants and
Yeah.
and even, God forbid, a McDonald's. Well, why not? I mean, but there's
Yeah.
not a Wendy's or something.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I've been on different groups that have worked on that or looked at that sort of thing, and it's definitely in the works. I mean, they've definitely got
Good.
plans to. They've just established a village center, so there's definitely things in the
Good.
works. So,
Here's another idea.
yeah,
I just thought of it.
yeah,
Further up, when it starts to get industrial,
right.
how about some hotels for the airport? Why should Windsor Locks have all the hotels?
Well, that's another thing. When I was on planning and zoning, we approved a hotel
Oh,
spot
yeah.
there. Yeah, so it's definitely in the works.
Good
But
deal.
it's the economy's kind of.
Holding
These
it
things have
back.
to come together. You can lay down the template, but the money has to come to do it, make it happen. So,
Sure. And
I think
as-
in the next 10 or 15 years, you'll see a dramatically different town center in East Granby.
Good.
This is a question I always try to ask folks. Is there any advice you would give to young people? If you had a few lines of wisdom for young folks today, what would that be?
Well, just going back to the remark I made before,
Right.
Try to focus, and parents should try and help their kids focus on their future and what they want to do.
Right.
And I'll add, not only decide what you want to do so you'll be successful,
Right.
but especially nowadays when people are not willing to settle for just making money, I hope, do something you love
Okay.
and make it work for you and make money at it. And try not to pick a field where there's no particular reason to love it, unless you happen to, where you don't make money. For example, I read and I read and echoed it in my head. Jack Welch and Susie, what's her name, who he married. He's formerly president of GE.
Yeah.
The woman he married, who worked for the magazine, it was a big scandal. She
Well, I
went to
knew he had
interview
gotten. I
him.
didn't know who he had married. Yeah, didn't
She went to
follow.
interview him for the magazine, and then people in her office found out she was so in love that she was telling everyone.
Okay.
And they thought it was a conflict of interest because she was the editor of the magazine.
Oh,
and
okay.
They got her fired, and Jack was in love, and they got married, and of course the
Right.
wife divorced him. blah,
Yeah,
blah, blah.
yeah.
So now they're a happy couple, and
Right.
they write a column.
Right.
I forget where it is.
Oh, so they do a column together.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I saw one that, as I mentioned, that was very wise. And by the way, he's a very casual guy.
Is he? Yeah.
I remember when he was talking about they were late to the internet, and someone said, "Aren't you concerned?" Or, well, this was in the middle of the .com.
Right.
He said, aren't you concerned about all these .com companies that
Right.
you're just starting out? He said, oh, no. He said, they don't have trucks or warehouses. We have all that stuff.
They got to come to us at some point, right?
Yeah,
Right,
I mean,
right.
all he has to do is go on the internet and they win.
But the advice in his column.
The advice in the column was, don't go into publishing and don't work for the airlines.
Okay.
Which now the latter I knew very well.
Yeah,
because, Bob Crandall, who Frank and I were talking about the other evening, who was
Okay,
the
yep.
president in the '80s, has since
Frank Negrati, who's also been a guest on this show, was.
yes, and Crandall made the comment a couple of years ago. I read it. He was talking about investing. He said, "Don't invest in the airlines." He said, "I love the airline business." He said, "But that's me."
Right.
He said, I have never invested a dime in it.
No. So, all right. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on here tonight, Paul.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
I didn't have to twist your arm too much to get you to come in, but it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us tonight. Once again, this is Reflections on East Granby, a regular series on GCTV Channel 16. You can also view it by going to gctv16.org, and the View Online prompt will lead you in the direction of our show. And we appreciate your joining us this evening, and have a nice night. Thank you.